All right, guys, we are really going to enter some scary territories right now by doing a live green keying inside Unreal Engine 5. Now, unfortunately, there are some bugs, but I'm going to show it to you guys anyways because I hope that in the future, Unreal will fix these issues, and by then you already know how things are done. So we have our character, our scene right here, and we want to do a green keying or a live green keying. I'm also going to show you both things. And the first thing that we have to do is load in our green screen shot. And to do that, we are going to need a media object. Go into your content browser, right click, go over to media right here, and choose Media Player. It's like a little television. Click on that, and it's going to ask you if it also needs to create the media texture. And yes, we want that. We just do that, select that option, hit OK. Give your media player a name. Let's call it Green Screen. Hit Enter. And at the same time, that media texture here has also been created. So what are these two files? The media player is going to be your source video, whether that is an offline MP4 or that is a live stream coming in from the camera. And then it's going to take that image and put that onto a media texture. And so you actually want to use that texture into your compositing later on. The media player itself is just the source media. So let's start with that. Double click on media player, and from here we can load in the green screen. Now let's first start with an offline file, and you can already see one right here. It automatically detected that I have an MP4 in my project. That is nothing more than this right here, Jordy green screen. If I double click on it, you can see what that file actually is, a simple MP4, and I already went ahead and just imported that into Unreal Engine. You can just put it into your assets folder or something, drag it into your content browser, just like that. And automatically it will recognize that. So we can just double click on it to enable that file. There we go. It sits now inside of that media player. And since this is a pretty short clip, I'm going to make sure that it's set to loop. Otherwise, it will just play once. And as you can see now, it's just a blank screen. So hit loop. Double click on that file again to load it again into the media player, and now it should stay looping that file. All right, great. We can now go ahead and save this, and unfortunately, we always need to let the media player stay open. We can't close this window or otherwise your texture won't be feeded with the media player. So we're just going to minimize that window. All right, and as you can see now here, the media texture also shows that video now, which is great, and we can use that texture to composite ourselves into the scene. How do we composite ourselves into the scene? Well, that is done using the Composure plugin. So again, head over to the settings on top. We've seen it before. Go over to plugins, and from there, look for Composure. Now, I already enabled that because you need to restart the engine, and we don't want to wait for that during this class. Once enabled and Unreal has been restarted, we can then go over to the window menu on top, go to Virtual Production, where we also found Lifelink, but this time we're going to choose Composure Compositing. Click on that, which will open up its dedicated window. So Composure is literally that. We're going to compose multiple layers together to create something new. And in this case, it's going to be the background or the scenery itself together with the green screen shots. This almost literally works the same as After Effects, where you have your different layers and you're working in a composition. So let's create that composition in here. Right click, choose Create New Comp. And we're not going to attach like a blueprint to it. We're going to keep it simple and just choose for an empty comp shot. There you go. We have our comp. And if we select that comp, you can see here that a new window will be activated, some sort of a camera window, a preview. It's currently empty because we don't have anything sitting in that composition just yet. So let's right click here on this comp and say Add Layer Elements. Click on it. And the first thing that we want to add to it is the media plate, which is going to be the green screen video. So click on that, and you can see it now if we expand the comp that the media plate sits in there. Let's right click one more time on the comp, say Add Layer Element, and that is going to be a CG layer. But basically what we're going to do is make sure to use the background scenery as the CG elements. So you can see it as the background and the foregrounds. Super easy. All right, I'm going to make a folder for that because it's starting to get a little bit messy here. Select the media plate, select the CG element and the comp because it will be adding those three layers into your outliner as well. And I'm going to click here on New Folder, and let's call that Green Key. There we go. It says Green Key. I mean Green Key. All right, let's start with the green screen itself. Select Media Plate and go into the Details panel. And right here, you can find Media Source. And as you can see, it's asking for a texture. So we can just go ahead and drag that texture here that we created previously into that property like so. And there we go. We now have our green screen clip inside of that media plate, which is great. Now, how can we remove that green? Because of course, that's something that we don't need. Well, if we scroll a little bit down here within the details panel of that media plate, we can find the chroma keying option under the transform passes. If you can't see these options here, make sure to expand transform passes. And here it is, chroma key. That means you can also do other things like blue key or whatever, but it's usually going to be a green key. And right here, you can find the key colors. So click here on the plus to add a key color. It's going to ask you, of course, what color. And if we actually click here on this button next to that color option, we get a new window, which makes it easier for us to select the color. So let's click here on the green with the color picker, and it's gone, as you can see now. So we can close that window, and there we go, I am keyed out. Now, if you need to fine-tune the keying itself, we can scroll down again, and under Material Parameters, again, you might want to expand that property. You have more controls to change the keying itself. So if we increase that or decrease, you can see here what that does to my face. This way, you can kind of like more fine-tune the keying itself. I'm still kind of like left with this little green edge around myself, and that we can remove with the pre-blur kernel size. So increase that to get rid of that little line. There we go. Looking good. Now, of course, never expect a tool like this to do perfect green keys. There's a reason for that we use After Effects or something like that to pull the perfect green key, because those programs just have a lot more possibilities. And I would also always suggest to do your green keying in a dedicated program and not inside Unreal Engine. But of course, if you want to do a live streaming, then you do need to do that live green keying, which of course is never going to be as good as if you would do it offline. But I think that is pretty obvious. All right, we are set. We are keyed out. Now let's have a look at the CG element, which should be the background. And as you can see here, it says missing camera. So that means that we need to create one. Let's make a nice framing of our meta-human right here, because the idea is to stand next to it. And I'm going to go over to this little menu on top and choose create camera here, Cine Actor, Cine Camera Actor. There we go. We have a camera. And I might want to change like the zoom a little bit more of that camera, set the focal length to, I don't know, like something like 25 or something. This is good. And let's also set the focus to the meta-human. There we go. And you know what? I'm actually going to jump into my camera real quick. So let's go over to perspective and change that to the Cine Camera Actor. And that way I can better align or change my framing using the normal controls. Now you are going to see like a huge performance decrease. But again, we are working in an early access program here. Maybe if you're watching this course in the future, it might be released and these things might be fixed. But okay, we have a framing and my idea is to like stand next to the meta-human. All right, so let me just eject from that camera view, and I'm going to drag my camera as well into the green screen folder, or the green key folder, to have everything organized. All right, so if we now select CG elements, you will see that will take that camera automatically. Now, if you have like multiple cameras in your scene, it might take the wrong one. So we can define which camera specifically as well. We can just do that by selecting the CG element layer, then going into the details panel, look for composure, and look for input then, and you should find an option here that says camera source. It's currently set to inherited, which is like the automatic thing, or you can also say overwrite, which allows you to target the camera actor. I only have one in my outliner so far, so I'm going to select that. Like, this is the second way of selecting your camera. All right, now the first thing that you might notice is that, hey, my colors are way different than my actual scene looks right here. And you're right. That's, again, one of those bugs of Composure, and unfortunately, there's no fix for that. I do have like a tiny little fix for it, but it's not really a fix. It's more like putting a patch on a wound. Anyways, that bug has to do with Lumen, which is something completely new inside Unreal Engine, and mostly has to do with reflections. You're going to see less of these artifacts when you're using Composure in an outdoor scene, in a landscape. Indoor, you're going to see more of these bugs. But again, all of this is so new, so I'm pretty sure that all of this will be fixed once Unreal Engine 5 is going to get released. All right, so our inputs have been set for both the CG element, which is the background or the camera view, and the media plate, which is the actual green screen clip. So if we select the comp layer right now, we should be seeing these two together, right? Well, not really. And here's where it gets a little bit complicated. And I know that I did promise you that we're not going to dive into blueprints and notes and everything, but there's just no other way around it. Like, we are going to have to create a couple of nodes, create again our own material, just like we've done with the emissive material, to make this comp work. So let's select the comp and let's go into the details panel again. And you want to look for the transform compositing passes. There are currently no layers in here for the transform passes, so we're going to click here on the plus icon to add an element that open up that or expands that property that has been created. And right here you can find a material option. Open up the drop-down menu and go over to create new material. You can also apply an existing material, but that's not really going to work. So let's create a new material, and it's asking you to choose a name for that. And let's call that green key composite material. Hit save, and there it is. Here's the material. So it's already looking at that material right now. It's been automatically being applied in that property, but it's not really showing much, and that is because we need to change what that material actually has to be. So double click on it to open up that material. And here we have those nodes again, which we are pretty scared of. But don't worry, it's quite simple to do this, and I'll explain it the best way possible. First things first, we have to define what kind of material this is. And this time it's not a surface material, which we have set right here. And we're going to change that to a post-process material. By doing that, all of these other options will be gone or will be disabled. So that makes it easier as well, as we can only work with the emissive color, so you can't really go wrong with that. Now let's move a little bit up to the side, because we're going to have to create two different new nodes in here. I'm going to right click to open up the node library, and we're going to look for the texture sample right here, parameter 2D. This is the one that you need. Click on it. And now the name of this node is going to be very important. Let me just make a little bit more room here with this window. There we go. Like, one of these nodes, we're going to create two of them, should be named to the CG element and the other one to the media plate. Let's call this one here media plate 1, which is the name of my green screen clip. Okay, we can click away, right click, and we're going to create that again. So look for texture sample parameter 2D, click on it, which is the same thing. And we're going to change the name. Instead of param, we're going to make sure that that is set to CG element 1. If you rename these layers, you need to rename them as well here in your material. All right, we're almost there. We just have to say, like, these two layers need to be on top of each other, just like in an editing program. And to do that, we're going to right click again to create one more node, and that is going to be called over. And you can see here that this is a node coming off from exposure, so it's specifically made for that. Click on that to create the over node. And now it's just a very simple matter of connecting the RGB alpha into A, which is going to be the top layer, and the RGB alpha of the background into the bottom layer, or B. Don't take RGB, you want to take RGB alpha. And now finally, take RGB alpha as the output and connect that into the emissive color, and that's it. Now we can go ahead and save that. Click on save for that material. And if we make some more room right now, there we go, and select the select the comp, bada bim, bada boom, there we are. We have our green screen clip playing back in the scene, and it's going super slow because Composure is really decreasing the performance here of my computer. Perhaps I should set the scalability not to cinematic now, but I don't know, to something like medium perhaps. There you go, it's playing back. Don't worry about all the flickering and all, that's the bug of Composure, but also because we've decreased the quality, of course. But we're in the scene, look at that. Now perhaps I want to put my MetaHuman on the other side, so let me just pin that. Preview window, and things really starting to get small here. Let's select the MetaHuman and just kind of like shove that up a little bit to this side. Rotate the guy. There we go. We're standing next to each other now. Look how tough I am. Now, I was talking previously about that patch on the wound, or that kind of like that little fix to fix the lighting and all in the Composure window. Well, that has to be done in the material as well. Let's make that window a little bit bigger here so we have some more space to work in. I'm going to right click in here and look for multiply. Multiply is a node that really does that. It multiplies a value. I'm going to click on it to create that node, and it says like, hey, I'm looking for two values. Like, You multiply A by B, and this here is going to be your output. It's as simple as that. So what we can do here is bring the values of the CG element, the RGBA, into multiply A, right-click again, and I'm going to look for constant. We've already worked with that with the 3-vector constant to create that emissive material because we can use the constant as a color. This time we're only going to use constant for one value. You can see here it's a very simple node. We can just insert like one value in here. Let's set that to 1, for instance. As simple as that. So we can now connect the constant to B. So what it's going to do is multiply what's coming out of the CG element value with 1. So that's just going to be the same thing. I mean, if you multiply 8 by 1, you get 8. But we're going to use the output now, and we're going to connect that here to B. So we're taking a little bit of a detour. Instead of going directly into the B value here from the background or the CG element, we're first going into the multiply. We are multiplying that by a value, and then we're going to output that again into the B. So if you now change the multiply to something like 0.3, like 8 times 0.3, I don't know what that is, but it is less than 8. So let's now go ahead and save that, and you will see here that our composure, the background, will be decreased in exposure. So that was the patch on the wound that I was talking about. Is it going to fix the problem? No, but it might help you a little bit. Now, you might think like, Jordy, like what's the use case of this now? We can do a green key and all, okay, but what can we actually do with this? Because after all, we're seeing this kind of like this bug, so is this actually useful? Well, I actually do have a very good use case for when you're working with a green screen and you want to composite yourself into Unreal Engine. But that has to do with live green keying or actually setting up your lights around your green key to match it with your environment rather than to work with an offline file like this MP4 right here. But that's for the next lesson. We already know how to set up the composure and everything inside Unreal Engine. The only thing that we have to change is the source of the media player to the live feed, so it's going to be a short lesson. Thanks for watching. All right, green keying. We're going to continue this lesson with a live green key. So inside Unreal Engine, I have not changed anything. We still have our composure going on right here with the offline MP4 video clip in there. So we want to swap that out with a live camera. Now, in order to do that, we need to figure out a way to bring the signal of the camera into the computer. And I think the best possible way to do that is with one of these little things right here. You might want to come closer. So this right here is called a cam link. It's a little dongle which has an input of an HDMI, which means that we can insert the camera output in there and it transforms out into a USB which we can plug into the computer. So let's do that. We can plug it in right there into the computer, and this right here is coming off from the camera. So I actually have a wireless transmitter because the camera is pretty far from here. But you can also just pull the HDMI cable directly from your camera into the cam link. Now, of course, there are many different brands out there, so you definitely don't need the cam link, for instance, but it's definitely one of the more popular dongles. All right, let's go over to the green screen studio now. Follow me, guys. Here we are, and Janik, our stand-in, is already standing here in the green screen studio. So what's basically happening now is the camera shooting Janik standing in front of that green screen while it's transforming that signal wirelessly over to the computer. So let's go back. Janik, make sure to keep standing right here so that I can plug you into the engine. Okay, we can take the helmet off right now. It's always dangerous in green screen land. We're gonna go back to our media player right here, which we've created in the previous lesson. Double click on it, in which we can assign the source media file. It's currently set to that offline MP4, but to insert a live video feed, so coming off from that cam link, we have to go up to the menu here on top, click on that folder, then choose one of these capture devices, video, and you should see in there Camlink 4K. Now the Camlink doesn't need any additional software. You literally just plug it into your computer and Unreal Engine will recognize it. I cannot speak for other brands, of course. Click on that, and if everything went correct, there we go. We got Janik. Look at that. He's live in the engine, and so far, everything is still running good. All right, let's save that media file. Let's minimize that, and let's see how it looks in Composure, because really that's all there is to it. So let's locate that comp file right here. It is. Select that, and there we go. Janik is inside the saloon. Yes, you're a cowboy, Janik. All right, the green key is not that perfect, so we might want to go back into the media plate layer. And within the settings, we can find back the chroma keying. We've all done this in a previous lesson, by the way, guys. And here we can find key colors. Again, I'm going to reset that value to pick a new color. Let's select here the background. There we go. And if needed, you can always dial here into the details of that key, because I see that we are eating a little bit out of Janik's sweater. So we need to like bring this back a little bit. Yeah, that's right, Janik. But I'm fixing it for you. I'm fixing it. So don't worry. All right, the keying looks fine. We can now go ahead and select the comp layer again, and to get a live feed of Janik standing in the saloon with the metahuman next to him. Now, is this useful? That's of course the question, because after all, the keying doesn't really look good. We're getting a performance decrease and everything. So is this something that we can use in the real world? Well, the way that I see it is that this is a very good use case of matching your light. With that metahuman into the scene, Janik standing next to that metahuman, we can go ahead, go into the green screen studio and actually change our light, adapt it to the scene to really match it perfectly. And once you have that, I would of course suggest to make a recording of just the camera without the green screen, capture your green screen shot and bring those two into something like After Effects or Premiere or any other video editor to do your green keying in there, which gives you better results and also better performance, but you'll have the perfect lighting match. Now, of course, if you want to do live streaming, then you can use this inside Unreal Engine. When you select your comp layer here in the outliner, you actually have this maximize button on the top right in your preview window of that comp. By clicking on that, it will maximize that frame, and you can bring this into a second monitor or something and use that as a feed for your live streaming. And that was it about live green screening. Janik, thank you so much for standing there in the green screen studio. And by the way, tell our students how great of a job they're doing so far.
You're doing great, students!
Have you heard that? You're doing great. All right, thank you so much for watching, guys. In the next lesson, we're gonna do something with DMX. I know, sounds scary. It seems like all of the systems in the engine are still running good. That is great. So that means that we can continue with the next lesson, which is about DMX. Not only a rapper from the 90s, but also a network to control lights. I'm going to keep this lesson short because DMX inside Unreal Engine is super easy, but also super complicated if you don't know anything about DMX. DMX itself can be a whole different course, so if you have never worked with DMX before, don't feel bad for just skipping this lesson or just watch it by leaning backwards. Don't bother too much by storing into your brain. But who knows, maybe in the future you are going to work with DMX, and then it's very useful to come back to this class and watch this lesson, and you'll instantly know what I'm talking about. But in short, for those who don't know what DMX is, well, right here I've got an iPad which is connected to my DMX network. And that allows me to control the lights. For instance, if I move this slider here up and down, you can see that it gets darker. I also have a few presets, like I can make it like dark, like this. I can make it more like red when there's an error in my engine, or I can make it green when that error is fixed. So those are all things that I can do with DMX. I can also animate certain scenes, make them fade from one to another, even control moving lights that have a pan or a tilt or something to make them rotate around. I mean, we've all seen that when going to a concert. All right, that was the simple part. Now comes the hard part, where we are going to connect the channels and universes into Unreal Engine. First things first, we're gonna go up to the menu, settings, plugins. We've been there before. Look for DMX. And this time we're gonna need the DMX engine. And when you enable that, automatically the DMX protocol will also be enabled. And you also wanna enable the DMX fixtures. So these three are the plugins that we need. Once they are enabled, restart the engine and come back into your project. We can now go ahead, right click into the content browser, go over to DMX right there and choose DMX library and give that a name, like for instance, DMX library. There we go. Open that file up by just double clicking onto it. And right in here, we can insert all of the lights that we have, the real lights into Unreal Engine. But first things first, we're gonna have to make a few settings to the project settings. So click on this button right here, which is gonna bring you to the project settings. By the way, this is the same window than if you would go over to settings here on top and then choose project settings. It's the same window. However, if you press here on that green button, it's already gonna bring you to the right page from the left side. All right, so what I wanna do here is set an input and an output. So I'm going to click here on the plus for both the inputs and the outputs. Let's open that up, these two indexes. And from here, you can select the protocol. So I am working with ArtNet, but some of you might be working with SACN. SACN is more broadly used. That's going to depend on what you have in your studio. Again, if you know what DMX is, this totally makes sense to you. But I have ArtNet here in my studio, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Then the network interface, and you want to select your own computer's IP address. I have seen cases in which the DMX won't work if you select a local host, one of these two IP addresses, which should also work. But for some reason, it doesn't always do that. So just select your own computer's IP address, which is 10.0.0.60 in my case. And I'm already going to do the same thing here for the output. Set that to 60 as well. And the last important setting is the universe. And I know that some people might start from the universe 0. Unfortunately, Unreal Engine 5 does not use 0. Like if you change that to 0, it won't work. It will change itself back to 1. So keep that in mind. If you have set your universe in your studio to 0, you want to change that to 1. If you want to use that as well inside Unreal Engine. Mine is set to 1, so I'm going to leave it at that as well as the output. So everything has been set. This is the only thing that we have to do. We can now just close that window and you'll see these two settings here appear in the library settings tab. All right, we can now go over to fixtures type. This right here is where we are going to define all of our fixtures. Just like in my iPad right here, like here on the side, these are all of my lights, all of my fixtures. If I tap on any of them, you will see that these sliders change, and that's because, well, every light has different kind of settings. Like some of these might be RGB lights, so they have more control. Some might be only have one color. Some might have effects or something like that. So the more things a light can do, the more sliders you have, or better said, the more channels you have. So here in Unreal, we're going to click on a new fixture type. And we can give that a name. For example, that's going to be here. Let's call that Aperture 600D. That's actually the light that is standing right there that is illuminating me right now. On the bottom, we then have to choose what kind of light that is. Like, is that a static light? Or maybe it's a moving headlight, like one of those lights which can move around for those dancing shows and such, or a strobe or whatever. But this time, it's just a static light. We're going to keep it simple for this lesson. Then the next column is going to be to add a mode. So just click on that. And with the mode, we can span a channel. So if you are running an RGB light, you're going to need 3 channels at least. So red, green, and blue. But in this case, we're just going to work with the dimming function, which is just going to make the intensity bright or dark. So in most cases, you can actually just leave that at auto. Right, and the last thing that we have to do is add the functions. So click on the Add Function button right here. So for the first channel, what does it have to do? Well, it has to dim. If you're going to add more functions in here, it's going to add a second channel. And by having here the auto channel span active, it's just going to adapt itself to how many channels or functions that you are using. But for this example, let's delete here the second function as we don't need that. All right, so it's been set to dimmer, and that's basically all there is to it. The last thing we have to do is go into the fixture patch. On the right side are all of my available channels, and on the left side, we have to add the fixtures to the fixture patch, in which we can find the Aperture 600D light, which I've set before. And by default, it might set itself to channel 1, but I'm going to look here in my iPad what channel it actually is. Actually, you need to look at your light at which channel that has been set, but for convenience, I'm going to look into my iPad. And I can see that my dimming function here is set to channel 60. So I'm going to change that as well in here. Just drag that over to channel 60. Where is it? Right there. All right, and that is it. We can now go ahead and save that library and close that window. Now, right here on top, you'll find a new DMX button. And if you click on that, you can actually open up the channel monitor. And by opening this window, you can see which channels are already active. As you can see, I've got much more lights here going on in the studio. But if we are going to change this value here of the intensity, now like you should be able to see, there we go, 60. You can see it like change in value. So that means that the reading of the ArtNet protocol here is working. Great. All right, now, how can we control a light in the scene? Well, let me just close here the monitor, and we're going to add a new light into the scene because unfortunately, it doesn't work out of the box with normal lights. We're going to make use of existing DMX lights. Now, where are they? Well, they are hidden within the engine folder structure. That should be somewhere right here behind me. but for convenience, let's look in the content browser. I'm going to click here on the settings button in my content browser, and from there, I'm also going to enable to show engine content. If I do that, you'll see that a new folder will pop up in here on the left side, the engine folder. Something that we normally shouldn't worry much about, but in there sits also the plugin folders. And again, I'm going to go to settings, and now we can also enable the show plugin content, which is going to show you another folder within the engine folder, which is called plugins. And we should find somewhere in here the DMX folder right here. DMX fixtures content. Let's expand that as well. And right here, we can find light fixtures. And here we can find some blueprints. We have a moving headlight, we have a moving matrix, we got a moving mirror, we got a static light, and that's actually the one that we are interested in. We have another static matrix, a static strobe, and a wash light. So whatever light that you're using, you can just pick from here and drag that into your scene like that. So maybe here in the saloon, we are going to give a show where we have some cowboys, perhaps, like singing, playing guitar, just having a good time. So I want to have this spotlight right here, perhaps on this chair, because maybe the cowboy with his guitar is going to sit here in that chair. So we have this nice light here set up. All right, so with that light now into our outliner, it is a blueprint, so that means all the functionality has already been written for us. We don't have to do anything except for going into the details panel, locate the DMX library, in which you either want to go back to your content browser up here and just kind of like drag that DMX library in there, or you can also locate it here from that drop-down menu, DMX library, the one that we have just created. All right, so the library has been loaded in. The next thing that we have to do is tell this light specific what light it is, because we know that we can assign multiple lights into our DMX library. It works just the same as the iPad app right here, which is, by the way, Luminaire, or like a DMX control board in which you also need to set all of your fixtures in. So let's click on here and we should find our aperture 600D in there. Select that and that's it. Seriously, that's it. How can we see this is working now? Well, we can do that by pressing play. Again, we have to go into simulation mode, and we've talked about that before as well. All right, and if everything went well, we can now take our iPads, control the real lights right here, but at the same time, we can also control the virtual light in Unreal Engine. So let's change the value here. Let's make it dark. Let's turn off that light. And look at that. My light here is off, and an Unreal Engine light is also off. How awesome is it to be alive right now, guys? All right, let's pump up the light, make it super bright. Wow, that is bright. But also, look at that in my saloon, how bright it is in there. Wow. This is really cool, guys. So if you know what DMX is, you've already been working with that for years, probably like a new world is going open for you right now. Because it's as simple as that. If you have RGB lights laying around, if you have moving lights or anything like that, you can also hook up your virtual lights up to your ArtNet or SACN. Now, does that mean that we can also create fake lights? Well, yes, of course. You can, of course, create dummy lights on your iPad or on your laptop, whichever thing you're using to control your lights, and you're going to set it to a channel that doesn't exist in your real studio. So you can just fake lights, whatever you like. Now, they won't affect your real lights here in the studio, but they will affect your lights in Unreal Engine if you set the channels correctly. So that is in a nutshell what DMX is about. And again, if you don't know what DMX is, then this might be very complicated to you. But if you do know what it is, then you know instantly how to go further with this, because it's the exact same thing as you would do on your iPad or on your computer or whatever which you use to control your lights. And with this lesson, we're already coming to the end of this class. That's a shame. Now, there's one last lesson that I've left for you guys, or let's say like a practical lesson, and that is where we're going to bring everything that we've learned together into a final scene capture. We're going to do live camera tracking in front of the green screen, and at the same time, we're going to control the lights using DMX, and all of that while recording that, putting it into a level sequence, and then we're going to end this class by rendering it out as a movie, which is, of course, the whole reason why we're here. So thank you so much for watching again. I'll see you in the next lesson. Hey guys, welcome to one of the last lessons of this class. I know it's a little bit sad, but this one is very fun actually. We're going to bring together some of the things that we've learned throughout this class and put that into a real life situation. So the idea now is to use the iPhone as a camera tracker, not as a controller, just use it as a tracker. And also the DMX, we're going to control that as well as we're filming myself in front of that green screen. We're going to record with a real camera over there in the green screen studio, at the same time record in Unreal Engine, and then afterwards in post-production like in After Effects or Premiere, we can lay those two shots on top of each other and do the green keying. All right, so let's go inside Unreal Engine and set everything up. And this is going to be a little bit of a recap because we've done this before. Go over to the window on top and we're going to go over to Virtual Production and then choose LifeLink, because the first thing that we want to do is link the iPhone to the engine. So go over to Source here on top. Go to Message Bus Source and your iPhone should appear in here. If it doesn't, then that means that you haven't opened up the app yet. So do that. We're going to go over to the LifeLink VCam app, tap on that, and as you're doing it, you should see your iOS device pop in the LifeLink window. All right, so click on that to connect it, and that's the only thing that we have to do. We can now just close the LifeLink window. Next thing that we're going to do is go to the Add window here on top or the menu, then go to Virtual Production, and we're going to take the Virtual Camera to Actor. Bring that into the scene and perhaps move that up a little bit. It's not going to be that important because after all, the iPhone is going to take over its movement. Now, in order for the iPhone to take over the virtual camera's movement, we need to connect them or link them together. So with that camera selected, go into your details panel and you want to click on VCam, which holds all of those options. And here on top, you should see virtual camera and you want to enable that. There we go. And then we can link here our iPhone to that camera. So from that drop-down menu, choose your iPhone. Now, one last thing that we have to do, and that is scroll down and under Output, we need to make this active too. And as we do that, we can then click here on the Connect button. There we go, and we should be connected to the Unreal Engine and your tracking should all work. Now, since we're only going to use the iPhone as a tracking device, we don't need all of these controls in here and everything. So what I'm going to do actually now is simply deactivate that option. There we go. And you'll find that we get this reconnecting pop-up right here. Don't worry, your tracking is still working. All right, let me just go out of the pilot view and you should see your camera floating around in here. There we go. Now, automatically, it will also create a marker, a bookmarker. Don't worry about that. I'm actually just going to delete that in the scene. And as we're moving around the iPhone, the camera is being tracked as well. So now it's our turn to place this iPhone in the green screen studio, and I'm going to need Janik for that. So you can go ahead, grab that iPhone, and actually place it inside of the camera. We have a special bracket for that, and that way we can mount it sturdy onto the camera. And as Janik is doing that, you might notice that, hey, our camera is gone. Where is it? Well, that's because he ran away with the iPhone, which is controlling the camera, of course. So I'm going to click on the virtual camera and try to find it, and it's right there, apparently in the dark. You know what? Let me set my lit view back to unlit so that I can better see my camera. It's outside. Oh, wow. Okay, then there are a couple of things that I want to do. In order to take over the control, because that's essentially what I'm going to do, reposition that camera, we're going to have to disable a few things. So with that camera selected, go back to your VCam, and we're going to scroll down because there are a couple of options that we want to disable for the iPhone to control, which we can all find back in the modifier stack. So right in here, you should find an option called, where is it? Thumbsticks. You want to disable that. As well as under, I think, index 5, you'll find the lens options. I'm going to disable that as well. What that allows me to do is just select the root virtual camera here on top and set a focal length for myself. Like that is one thing that we can do. For instance, set that to like 20 or something. And I can go into the pilot view automatically. I've gone into there, so I can now just right click and use the WASD keys to move around and actually create a framing that I like. Let me just set it back to lit to get a better understanding of the scene. There we go. And like a framing like this should work. I think this looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to eject from the pilot view and have a look. My camera should be at the right spot. That is perfect. Now, something else that we want to do is also set the focus. So we want to set the focus where the actor is going to stand, but where exactly is that going to be? Well, we're going to use a little trick for that. I'm going to ask Janik right now to take off the iPhone from the bracket of the camera and actually place it on the floor where I am going to stand later. And you can see here that the camera is kind of like floating like a ghost around. There we go, it sits now on the floor. And now I'm going to mark that point, which we can actually do by creating a simple shape. So go up to the Add menu here on top, go to Shapes, and take something like the cylinder. Drag it into your scene on top of your camera. And I'm going to decrease the size a little bit of that one, but I do want to extend that in height. There we go. So this here is a spot where I'm going to stand. We've marked it. So now we can ask Janik to take the iPhone back off the ground and position it back into the bracket of the camera. You can see there the camera following that beautifully. It's always funny to see that happen. All right, so now if we select the camera, we should see the cylinder in our shot, and we can go over to the focus settings, which should be right here, focus method, and we can set that to like manual focus distance. Take the picker, and let me zoom a little bit more into that cylinder. Take the picker, and let's pick the cylinder like that, which should put the cylinder into focus or the spot where I'm going to stand. Now, one problem here, guys. When we're going to render out this movie, that cylinder will also be in my shot, which we don't want to happen. So what we're going to do here is select that cylinder, go over to the Details panel, and I'm going to search for Hidden. And there should be an option called under Rendering, Actor Hidden in Game. Enable that, and now we're telling Unreal like, hey, that object should stay in there whenever we're working inside of Unreal, but once we're going to render, you have to like hide that object. And we can actually already do that in the editor view. If you press the G key to hide all of these billboards right here, that cylinder will also be seen as a sort of a billboard, and it will be hidden from the editor. There we go. So you can always toggle back and forward between these two views. All right, everything is set. We can now start recording. So in order to do that, we're going to have to go over to the window on top, go to Cinematics, and choose the Take Recorder if that window wasn't already open. Inside the Take Recorder, we need to define which things need to be recorded, which obviously is going to be the virtual camera. So let's drag that into the Take Recorder, as well as the DMX, which we're also going to control during the live recording. Now, we can't just drag in the static headlight in there because that is not actually being animated. It's actually more our DMX library, which is going to do all of the numbers and the magic and all. So we want our DMX library to be inside of the Take Recorder. Now to do that, we're going to have to click here on Source, from which we can also select an actor from the outliner, but we can also select here the DMX library. So just select that, and just like with the static headlight, we need to select the library and define which library that we want to work with, because yes, we can make multiple libraries. We've got only one, which we created in the previous lesson, so just select that DMX library. And finally, add all the fixtures which were defined within the library here into the Take Recorder, and there it is, the aperture 1200D. All right, we can now go ahead and press the record button inside Unreal Engine, and I'm going to ask Janik to do the same thing, but then with this real life camera. And as we're now both recording, I'm also going to ask him to bump the camera a little bit as it's standing on that tripod, because that way we're getting a synchronization point. We see a bump in the real camera, but with that tracker mounted on top of it, we also see that back in our Unreal Engine shot. So that is a real good point to sync the two shots together. And now it's time to go into the green screen studio. So let's do that, guys. Let's go over to the green screen studio. I mean, no, I'm lying. This is a saloon. That's right. I'm standing in the saloon right now, guys, and I hope that they're serving good drinks there at the bar. I do hope so, because oh no, a spotlight. Now, I don't want to stand in the spotlight. I'm a little bit shy when it comes down to spotlight, so please turn that off. Thank you. You know what? I actually feel much more safer inside the engine, so let me just go back to the Unreal Engine. All right, you can hit the stop button, Janik, and I will do the same thing right here inside Unreal Engine. Hit the stop button, there we go. So now, where is that recording? You should see a pop-up right here, which if you click on Browse To, will automatically bring you to it, but it's now faded out, it's gone, so let's manually go to the folder where our recording is in. So that is in the content browser, and I'm gonna go over to Cinematics, a folder that has automatically been created by the Take Recorder. Open up Takes, and you should find the today date in here in which you've gathered all of your recordings. We only have one, which is Scene 1. And here it is, the level sequence. We can just double click on that to open it up, and here it is, guys. And if you scrub through it, you can see the entire camera motion happening, which is really good, but the DMX isn't working, and that is because we need to be in simulation mode. So go on top here, we've seen that previously. We need to be in simulation mode to see the DMX. All right, let's also select the camera cuts view. There we go. And now if we play this back, we should see our DMX working. Janik was here I think, fumbling around a little bit, so let me just scrub a little bit forward in time. I think right here should be the right point where I come inside of the frame. So here I'm talking about how nice it is in the bar with the drinks and everything. And somewhere right here, the spotlight should go on, and I'd probably be a little bit afraid. I'm a little bit shy when it comes down to spotlights. So spotlight goes back off, and I walk out of the frame. So that recording went really well. We have the camera shaking there, and we got the DMX working. So that is great. All right, so now it's time to render out this movie that we've recorded so that we can place our green screen shot on top of there, do the green keying, and have our final video. But that's for the next lesson, in which we'll discover how rendering in Unreal Engine works. Rendering. The last step of the engine and the last step of your creative process. In this final lesson, we're going to export our creation into an actual movie so that we can share it with friends or upload to the web. Going over to my content browser, we have a few sequences. Right here is the folder where we have the live animation sequence and my animation. Maybe I should have named them better, but anyways, these are the two level sequences that we created previously in this class. The first one was my animation, and when I double click on that, you'll actually see that we can't really play this back anymore, and most of these layers are now in red. That is because we have the wrong level open. These were created, I think, in lesson 18. So if you go back to content browser, go to levels, where I have all the different levels in here, and they are numbered by each lesson. But anyways, I'm going to open up lesson 18 right here, double click on that. There we go. Now let's go back to sequences and open up my animation. And now you will see that everything is working. So we can enable here the viewport for the camera cuts and play back the animation that we created previously. So even though that you can have multiple timelines or multiple sequences, they are always bound to a certain world or to a certain level. When you create a new level and a new sequence that is built within that level, you have to make sure to always open up that level. So now we have this beautiful animation right here, as well as the other live animation, and we also did that real life recording with the green screen studio over there. We want to render those out, export them as an actual video. How do we do that? Well, there are two ways of doing that. First, we go back to the sequencer, and from here we can actually find a button on top that says render this movie to a video. Now when you're doing that, make sure to first click here on these three dots, open that menu, and make sure to choose Movie Render Queue. Now, I believe that in the future, they are going to remove the movie scene capture because we don't actually use that. It's a very quick way of rendering something, but we can't really get the good quality out of that option. So make sure that Movie Render Queue is enabled right here, and then you can click on that icon. Or a second way is also by going up to the menu on top, Window, go to Cinematics, and there you also have the Movie Render Queue right here. If you open it up through here, you actually have an empty render queue, but if you open that window up through this button right here, then it will add this sequence automatically into the queue already. If you want to add more level sequences in here, you can click on the render button on top, and then you can select the sequences that you would like to add to the queue, such as the live animation. Let's also add that one, and also this one here, the scene 1, take 1 level sequence, which was created with the take recorder from the previous lesson. All right, so we've got 3 sequences in the movie render queue, so that means that we can actually render 3 different videos out from this. Now, very important, like I said before, every sequence here is linked to a different level. Of course, that's not always the case, but the way that I worked, it is that way, because I created a new level for every new lesson for you to easily follow better. So for my live animation, I know that we actually worked in lesson 19. And then for the scene 1, take 1 capture, that was one of the last lessons, so that's going to be lesson 23 down here. So that is going to be very important that you set the map correctly. All right, so now it's going to ask us for the settings. Of course, just like any other program where we can render out from, it's going to ask us like, what format do you want? What's the resolution, the frame rate, and all those kind of stuffs. Well, for that, we're going to have to click here on unsaved config. So just click on that, which is going to open up a new window, and from here we can set the settings. First of all comes the export format. It's currently or by default set to JPEG. which we can change by going up to the menu on top, click on settings, and add any kind of settings in there that we would like to change or add. And there are mostly two different kind of settings that I would look at. One is either the Apple ProRes and the other is the EXR sequence. Now, normally you should always take that EXR sequence. EXR is a raw photo format, so that means we're going to render it out as a photo sequence, just like if you would render to a PNG sequence. You get the highest possible quality. Plus, the big benefit of exporting to a photo sequence is that whenever your render crashes at let's say frame 55, that you can restart your render starting from frame 55 and you don't need to render those frames before. That's definitely going to be very useful if you have to render for hours or even for days. Apple ProRes is a great alternative, but keep in mind that if your render crashes, you need to re-render your entire movie because you are exporting it as a single movie file. I oftentimes take a ProRes format if I know that my export will just take around like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something. For this example, I will just also take the Apple ProRes right here. So that means that I can either disable the JPEG sequence, I can enable that as well so that we have double exports. That's up to you, or we can also just delete that export setting. That's the same as disabling it. All right, moving on. So we have set the format that is good within the Apple ProRes. We have some more options such as the codec. For example, if 4:2 is enough for you, then you can just pick that. Next up, we're going to add a very important setting to our config right here. Go back to the plus settings button on top, and this time we're going to add the anti-aliasing option to it. Now, anti-aliasing is going to give us a couple of options. First of all, we can overwrite the default anti-aliasing. So check that box, and from there we can choose a different method. Now, these here on the bottom are all kind of like real-time anti-aliasing methods, and those are great for playing games. But when you are going to render out your movie, you don't need to have that real-time capability. I mean, you can go grab a coffee while you are rendering. So that's the reason why we're going to set that to none and define a temporal sample count of our cells. For instance, 64 sample counts. Now, this is what's used the most. If your rendering is taking way too long, you can change that to something like 32, which is still pretty good. And for the sake of this lesson, I will also just put it at 32. All right, so that is anti-aliasing, a very important setting. But then we have one more super important setting, which can be found down here. All the way in the bottom, we have the use camera cut for warm-up. And before I'm going to explain what this is, let me first expand the advanced options and talk about the render warm-up counts. By default, it's set to 32. We can increase that or even bring that all the way down to 0, which I would not recommend. So you can just leave that at 32. Basically, what that means is that the engine will render the first 32 frames, but don't actually export that. And why is that important? Well, there are so many things going on inside the engine, such as Lumen, which needs some time to make sure that everything looks right. If you export your movie without the warm-up, you might see flickering going on in your scene, or even your camera position might be completely off somewhere. That's the crazy thing about Unreal Engine, and that's why it kind of needs this warm-up. So that is good that we have that set right here, but then there is one more important setting. Let me just make a little bit more space here. We have different camera cuts here in our sequence. Now, with every camera cut, that same problem would occur again. If we cut here from the balcony camera over to the stairs camera, we might see a sudden flicker for a couple of frames. Your lighting is going to act very weird, or even your camera position might be through the floor or something. That's something you never know with Unreal, but luckily the option is there, and we just have to enable to use camera cuts for warm-up. So now it's going to pre-render every single camera cut here for 32 frames. All right, and those were the most important settings. Now let's go to the last thing here, output, which is going to be pretty self-explanatory. We can set a resolution, for instance. Let's go for a 4K resolution. There we go. We can choose where we would like to export that. Let me just choose my desktop. There we go. Finally, we can give it a name, or it's just going to take the sequence name. Let's just leave it at that. That's fine for me. We can set a custom frame rate if we want to. We can enable that right here. Set something else like, I don't know, like 30 frames per second. Perhaps you want to have some handlebars. That is all up to you. But finally, something pretty important here, and that is use custom playback range. If this is disabled, it will just render out the entire sequence. If you have that enabled, you can actually set a starting frame count. For example, we want to start at frame 55 because maybe your exporting was crashed at that point, so you can continue from frame 55. But for now, I'm just going to disable that option and just render out the entire sequences. All right, everything is looking good. The last thing that I want to do is go up here to the top right and say Save Preset. And I'm going to click here on Save as Preset. That's going to be a preset file. I'm just going to call it like ProRes rendering. Hit Save. And then hit Accept here on the bottom. And you'll see here that that preset has been added to my first level sequence. And so we can also set the same preset for the other sequences. So this one and this one as well. All right, and that is all there is to it. We can now hit the Render Local button to render on your own computer and not use a network or something. That's where the remote setting is for. Click on that and you'll start to see a preview if everything went right. This is the hard part of the engine. We have to keep an eye on it, that it won't crash, that it won't turn red, that we don't see smoke. That is going to be important. But you'll see here now a preview. This will always be a low quality preview that you see here. So if there's anything looking weird, don't worry too much. Wait until the end and just see how your final export looks. Right here on the bottom left, you can see the progress. So we are at 2% of the first level sequence. And here you can see the subsample, that 32 anti-aliasing that we've set. So for every frame, it's going to make 32 calculations to get good anti-aliasing. And so we get an overall view of at which frame count that we are currently at. So that's it. Now just wait it out and drink a coffee or something. Where's my mug? Right here. It's empty, so let me just grab a new coffee. It's always dangerous outside of the engine, so make sure to put on your helmet.